Hello, my great learners. This is Kate Munyoki once more. So in today's video, actually, we're going to be talking about the internal and forming process. I know we've been discussing this for a while, and we said earlier, actually, we have several subtopics under this topic. We gave some examples of the processes we shall be discussing within the course of this topic. And actually, some of the processes we said we have folding, we have faulting, we have volcanicity, we have earthquakes. I think those are the processes, and I had mentioned them earlier. So, without wastage of time, allow me to take you through the subtopic that is folding. Let us try to introduce the subtopic that is folding. So when you talk about folding, we're simply talking about the bending upwards and downwards. The bending, the bending upwards and downwards of the crustal rocks, actually due to the earth movement. That is one of the definition of the folding. I'm saying that it is the bending of the crustal rocks that is upwards and downwards due to the earth movement. We can also define folding as a process whereby the young sedimentary rocks are usually bent upwards or downwards by compressional forces. I don't know whether you remember compressional forces, my good learners. We had talked about it earlier. Among the tectonic forces, we talked about extensional forces. Is it extensional? Sorry, tensional forces. We talked about compressional forces, and we had also talked about shear and tear forces. So I've said the second definition of the folding, actually, it is a process whereby the young sedimentary rocks, they usually bend either upwards or downwards simply because of being subjected to compressional forces. When you talk about compressional forces, actually, they are forces which push crustal rocks towards each other, causing some stress, some squeezing. I don't know whether you've realized this, that we've said folding actually takes place in the young sedimentary rocks. The rocks must be sedimentary rocks. If you can remember, one of the characteristics of sedimentary rocks, we said they are usually arranged in layers. So the nature of rocks, the nature of crustal rocks we're talking about here, they must be sedimentary rocks. And something else, they are also supposed to be young. Sorry. Okay. So I think that is it. So we have some terms actually we need to know when you talk about the process of folding. We have various terms. Process number one, not process but term, I'm sorry. We have the antcline. The antcline actually are the up folds. The up folds. These are the antclines. We have synclines, that is the down folds. We've said the folding actually, it is the bending upwards or downwards of the crustal rocks. So we have several terms we're going to talk about them. Antcline, we're also going to talk about syncline. We also have the other term that is axis. We're also going to have another term that is limb. We also have crest, and we have finally trough. So we have various terms which actually we need to know when we talk about the process of folding. So allow me briefly to talk about these terms. I'm going to try to explain what they mean, and we're going to be checking this that on a diagram. So when you talk about antcline, I think I've earlier said that is simply the up folds. The up folds. That is the part we call the antcline. And then the other term is syncline. I've said they are the down folds. The up folds, we've called them the antcline, while the down folds, we call them the syncline. The other term is actually crest. When we talk about crest, we're simply talking about the topmost part of the antcline. This is the antcline. Antcline. The topmost part of antcline, this part, it's like a fold mountain, the topmost part of the mountain. Let me give an example by using a fold mountain. So the topmost part of antcline actually is what we call the crest. And we have another term that is trough. Trough is the bottommost part of the syncline. The bottommost, we've said this is syncline, that is the depression like. So the bottommost part That the lowest part of the syncline is what we call the trough. The other term I've just talked about the axis, and when you talk about axis, it's actually the line which passes through an antcline. If this is the antcline, we have an imaginary line which passes through there, and that is what we call the antcline. The other term we talked about, I think, is a limb. And I think when you talk about a lip, actually, we're simply talking about the side of the crust rock, which dips from the point where we have the axis. If this is the antcline, in between we have the axis. So the both sides which slopes, which dips on this side, on the other side, is what we call the lip. From there, my good learners, allow me to take you through some factors that determine the folding of crust rocks. Some factors that determine the folding of the crust rocks. So we have around 3 factors actually. One of the factors, it's about the strength of the. We simply want to finish up by talking about the factors that determine the folding of the crust rocks, and I've said we only have 3 factors. Yeah, maybe you might come across some other factors, but for me, allow me to take you through only 3 factors that determine the folding of the crust rocks. The process number 1, not process, but the factor number 1, we have the strength of the crust rock. The strength of the compressional forces. For the folding to take place, we must have forces which are being subjected to these compressional forces. And to our case, the kind of the force we need to push crust rocks, actually it's the compressional forces. So I'm talking about factor number 1 being the strength of the compressional forces. And how do we try to elaborate this one? Actually, when you talk about the strength of the compressional forces, it is supposed to be having high intensity, the high intensity. So the strength of the compressional forces is supposed to be a bit stronger, so that when the crust rocks are pushed, they can be in a position to form some high anticlines and synclines. Factor number 2, it is the elasticity of the rocks being affected. The elasticity, from the word elastic, elasticity of the rocks being affected. So when you talk about this, we simply trying to say that the rocks which are being subjected to compressional forces, they are supposed to be in a position to be deformed, to change, and then fold, forming some up folds and down folds. So I've said that is the elasticity of the affected rocks. The other factor, and the last factor which I'm going to talk about, it's actually the crust rocks should be young. We've said the age of the crust rocks, the nature or the age of the crust rocks, actually they are supposed to be young, so that whenever we have them subjected to the compressional forces, they might be able to form the anticlines and the cyclines. So that was for today, learners. Let's try to evaluate our class. What have we been talking about? Actually, my good learners, we've been talking about the folding process. The folding process, I've said, is one of the processes, it's among the internal and forming processes. So we've said, what is the definition of folding? My good learners, we've said folding simply means the bending upwards or downwards of the crust rocks as a result of the earth movement. The bending upwards and downwards of the crust rocks as a result of the earth movement. We also have another definition whereby we can say folding actually is a process whereby the young sedimentary rocks, they bend upwards and downwards, by the compressional forces, as a result of the compressional forces. So if you can remember very well, we said this process actually occurs in the young sedimentary rocks. So the nature of the rocks must be young, and they must be sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks, if you can remember, we said they are rocks which are actually arranged in layers. They have other characteristics. I hope you can remember that, because you were taught actually in Form 1. So we've also said we have some terms we need to know, and some of these terms actually I've said we're going to be able to see them in the diagram. That is the antcline, we have synclines, we have the axis, we have the crest, we have the trough, we have the, which other part did we talk about? The axis, have I mentioned the axis? The limb, and so on. So, and as I finish, we say the compression of forces, they are actually the forces which push crust or rocks towards each other. Yeah, leading the crust or rocks to have some stress, yeah, to be squeezed. Yeah. So finally, as we finish, my good learners, I've said I'm going to take you through the factors that determine folding of the crust or rocks, the factors that determine the folding of crust or rocks. And I'm only going to take you through three factors. One is the strength of the compression of forces, the strength of compression of forces, that is the intensity of the compression of forces. Two, I've said it's the age of the crust or rocks. I'm at the age of the rocks, and I've said actually they're supposed to be young, sedimentary rocks. Number three, it is the elasticity of the crust or rocks here. Elasticity from the word elastic, whether when the rocks are subjected to compression of forces, they're likely to be deformed or change, forming the up folds and the down folds. Yeah. So that was for today, my good learners. I hope you've learned something. So until next time, allow me to say